Communication, it is so important in a lot of what we do as real estate investors. It's a super important part of negotiation as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today on the Sub2Deals Show. Hey, Sub2ers, welcome to this episode of the Sub2Deals Show, where we talk about all things subject to. Now, occasionally, we will talk about something else besides creative finance, but it's always something to help you with your real estate investing business. If you're listening to our podcast today, we would love to invite you to go over to our YouTube channel and check us out. You can see us do our podcast, see our smiling faces, and look at some of the videos that we release every single day. And you can find that at sub2tv.com. That's SUB, 2TV.com. If you're interested in creative finance, and that's why you're here, check us out at sub2university.com. Whether you're interested in negotiation, learning how to put together a Sub2 deal, learning how to do your own kitchen table closes, or filling out the contracts, we've got some training over there for you. So go check that out. And if you're looking for training, ongoing training, and you're on a budget, check out our $7coaching.com. $7 coaching, $7 a month. Guys, you can't buy a latte for $7 a month. So get over there, check that out, and we'll be glad to help you with your real estate investing business. Today, guys, we've got Brenden from MasterTalk here. He's going to talk to us about being an effective communicator. Brenden, welcome to the show.
Will, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, thanks so much for being here. You know, whether you're communicating with your wife, a contractor, a seller, a buyer, communication is just so important. Tell us, how can we become better communicators?
Absolutely. You know, for me, communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, Will.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is body language, one of them is facial expression, storytelling, eye contact, and the list goes on. It can get really confusing. Kind of like when you're buying your first real estate property. There's so many things to keep in mind, but then after you've sold and bought 25 properties, like, okay, I think I have a better idea of what's happening here. So for me, the question has been, what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle? Because if we can juggle those 3 balls in the air, we'll get much better at communication. So let me start with ball number 1, and then we'll go from there. Ball number 1 is the random word exercise. Well, pick a word like phone, like post-it note, like yellow, like home, and create random presentations for 60 seconds. This serves 2 main purposes. Number 1, it helps you deal with uncertainty. Life is filled with uncertainty, Will. You could walk in one morning, raise capital, and find out the next day that your main capital raiser runs out and says, I don't have the money anymore. I don't want to fill up the round. You go, oh my God, how do I do this? Or we go to a networking cocktail and we meet somebody and we're like, this person is really awkward to talk to. And the second piece is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So I encourage us to do that exercise every day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Brenden, tell me, how did you become an expert on communication? What got you started sharing this information with people?
Yeah, absolutely will. So for me, the story began in business school. I studied in accounting, funny enough, which is literally the opposite of what I do today. And while I was being a numbers guy, I started competing in case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, Will, but for nerds.
Mm-hmm.
So while other guys my age were playing rugby or football or baseball, I wasn't one of those guys. I was doing presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak.
Right.
But then as I got older, I started to coach other students on how to communicate ideas. And I accidentally developed a skill in coaching other people on how to speak. So the idea for the YouTube channel Master Talk really came from, hey, nobody's really sharing this information for free on how to communicate, like the random word exercise is an example.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started making videos, and then a few years later, it turned to something I never could have imagined.
Right. Okay. So that was your sports in school was communication and public speaking. That's interesting. I remember hearing once that public speaking outranks death as the top fear of most people. Why do you think that is?
I think some of that is propaganda, Will, but I don't know from who or for what reason, but maybe society doesn't want us to speak.
Right.
But I think for me, at the end of the day, the reason we're scared of communication really makes sense at the end of the day. Let's think about it from a common sense perspective. Where do we learn how to speak formally? The answer is school. Whether
Mhm.
we live in the US or Canada or some other country in the world, that's where we learn how to present high school, middle school. But all of those presentations will have three fundamental problems. One, they're all mandatory. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, Will, you want to get breakfast and present all day?" Nobody says that. That's
Mhm.
one. The second problem is you never get to present something you care about. So it's never, "Hey, Will, what are you passionate about? Education, real estate, single family, right?" It's not that. It's Shakespearean poetry, and you don't really have a choice in the matter. And the third piece is every presentation is tied to a punishment. So if you
Mhm.
don't do a great job, you get punished for it. So we grow up believing through a series of these experiences, Will, as adults, that communication is a chore. So we feel it is one, and nobody wants to get better at doing the dishes. That's why I think we're scared of communication. But do I think it's scarier than death? Probably not.
Mhm. One of the things that, well, I'll tell you this before we get to that question. Going back to, I remember the first time I got started as a real estate investor and started teaching almost by accident. I got so many questions and emails every day from people saying, "How do you do this? How do you do that?" I wrote a course. And then, of course, once I wrote a course, I had to go out to RIAs and present to sell them. So I remember the first time that I had to get up in front of a crowd. I mean, it really was scary, I mean, having to stand on a stage in front of all of these people, everybody's watching you. It really can be scary, even if you know what you're talking about, you know. So I think that probably is a big fear. But one of the things we do with our investors to help them get past a fear of talking to sellers, which is super important in our business, as creative finance people, we generally talk to sellers that have a house to sell. Sometimes they didn't really even know they wanted to sell their house. They just have title issues or code enforcement problems. Uh, but as far as talking to sellers, we'll do role playing, like you be a seller, I'll be the buyer, and we'll handle objections and that sort of thing. You had mentioned earlier some other exercises that you can do to become a better communicator. What other things do you think people can do to become better at communicating?
Yeah, absolutely will. And it's similar to the role play, which is ball number two, the question drill.
Mhm.
We get asked questions all the time in our life, Will. At school, at work, in our jobs as real estate investors, from buyers or sellers. But a lot of us are not ready for the questions that life has in store for us. I'll give you an example for me. When I got started guesting on podcasts, I sucked. I was horrendous. I remember some guy asked me, "Hey, Brenden, where does the fear of communication come from?" And I looked at the guy and I said, New York City? Maybe Florida? I don't know. So I didn't know the answer. So how did I fix this? Well, every single day for 5 minutes, I answered one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise, my
Mhm.
products, or my services. But if you do that every day for 5 minutes, you don't even need a partner to do this, like in a role
Mhm.
play as an example.
Right.
You'll have answered 365 questions. So here's what you do: get all the buyers together and just pool together all of the possible questions that a seller can ask you
Right.
and make a huge list of all those questions. And every day for 5 minutes while you're sipping your cup of coffee in the morning, answer one of them. And if you do that for a year, you'll be bulletproof.
Right. That's great advice, really. Well, I had a student one time that took questions and just made flashcards out of them, and that's what they did. It's very similar, and that was everybody loved that flashcard. So that's a great idea. Because most of the offers that we present, most people in the world, if they want to buy a house, they hire a real estate agent. The agent takes them out, shows them properties. They make offers, bank financing, and that's how they buy a house. Now, what we do is a little bit different. We try to contact sellers. Maybe they're in foreclosure. Maybe they've got a house that's in bad repair. And we approach them about buying that house. And we do that with creative financing, which is not bank financing. It's usually involves some sort of seller financing or taking over their payments or that sort of thing. And this could be challenging because it's different. It's not the norm. Whether we're talking to an agent that has them listed or the seller themselves, what do you think we can do as investors when we have something unusual to present? What can we do to get better acceptance rates, and what tips or tricks can you share on how we can communicate better with something that's unusual?
Absolutely will. Of course, this is an interesting situation for me, but I think the principle still applies, which is I always encourage people in sales in general to go back to the people who already bought from them and are
Mhm.
raving fans. Because I'm obviously making the assumption that we're doing good in the world. So
Mhm.
that means the people who bought from us love us,
Mhm.
because or have some affection towards us. So what I've always done is I always sit those people down and go, give me some advice. How do you think I should sell more people like you? Why did you end up choosing my model of financing and going my route instead of using a traditional sales process? And I don't know what they would answer in this case. They might say
Mhm.
something like, well, Will, the reason I went with you instead of a traditional bank is because nobody wanted to buy my house because it's
Right.
foreclosed and there's a bunch of
Mhm.
property damage and all that stuff. And then you write down all of those challenges.
Mhm.
Because if you sold that one person, there's another person like that in America, probably thousands of people like that one person, the same avatar. So when you meet that same avatar again and you engage in a discussion, you immediately bring up the challenges and you describe the challenges that person is going through to the most granular level. So you
Mhm.
would say something like, hey, I know you've been struggling to sell this house now for the past 6 months. 12. How long has it been? They go, you know
Mhm.
what? Well, you're right. It's been 3 years. You're like, what is that costing you? You're spending home insurance. I like how you already spent. I don't. By the way, I've never bought a foreclosed house, but notice how I'm convincing your audience that I've been doing this for 5 years, right? And that's really the key. Is
Mhm.
the overarching theme that people can write down, Will, is a master salesman or woman is able to describe the story of the life that their ideal client is going through. Where at the end of that conversation, when they're done describing that person's challenges, they go, have I met you before? Like,
Mhm.
you know exactly what I'm going through. And oftentimes, Will, if a prospect feels that you've perfectly described the challenge or the problem they're facing, their brain will automatically go to the person standing in front of me is probably the perfect solution to that problem too.
Mhm. Mhm. For years and years, practicing negotiation. In fact, we were at an event this weekend where we're talking about negotiation, having conversations with people. One of the top tips they always give is that you're supposed to, as much as you can, mirror the speech patterns and things of the person that you're talking to. That helps make them more comfortable and all of those things. Do you think that's true? And how important is that?
I definitely think that's true, and it plays a significant role in the sales process. And I'll explain why. The reason is because people don't really buy what you say at the end of the day.
Mhm.
That's a big part of it, but they mostly buy how they feel around you. Let me give you an example that might resonate with your audience that I think applies, but correct me if it doesn't.
Mhm.
My assumption is if we're buying a foreclosed home, the person who's selling it probably isn't the richest person in America.
Right.
If they have a foreclosed homes, they're probably middle to low income in that range, let's say middle at the top end. So that means if I'm meeting them in person, I ain't putting a suit on.
Mhm.
I am putting a really nice, expensive dress shirt on, because it doesn't matter what I say. They'll go, this person is not in, I don't, this person is not in the same universe as me. I don't trust them
Mhm. Right.
before the conversation even starts. This is called prefluence, right? Whenever you're the impression you're creating before you go up to them. But if somebody feels like you're one of them, if they feel like you're in the same space as them, like one small example of how I did this with you actually prior to the conversation is you asked me how to pronounce my last name. So if I said something like, it's Kumarasamy, you better get it right, you're making assumptions about me right away. You're going, oh, this person's going to be uptight. This is going to be a really bad interview. Oh my God, this is going to be a hard 30 minutes. But instead, what did I say? I said, hey, well, don't even worry about it, man. You could just say Brenden from Master. That's totally fine. I
Right.
get that all the time. So what I'm doing indirectly is I'm putting you at ease. You're going, oh, Brenden is such a cool guy. So you're making up stories that might or might not be true about me, by the way, just based on the way that I'm mirroring your energy. And I'm
Mhm.
also doing that in the context of how I'm speaking to you.
Mhm.
There's three types of hosts that I'll have on a podcast. The first type is really extroverted and loud. So they talk like this, they're really loud. So I always mirror that excitement. The second type is the really shy person. Hey, Brenden, it's really nice to have you on the show. So I'll change my voice or else they'll get scared of me. You're more in the middle. So I
Mhm.
balance my energy. So I'm literally doing it in real time to build rapport, but I
Right.
do it subconsciously now. So yes, it
Right.
does matter.
Oh yeah, and it works too because I mean, from right away, I knew I said you were going to be a lot of fun and easy to deal with. Because and as a host, I've had people from all types too come on too. Hard to get any information out of, unpleasant to deal with, and the whole bit. So yeah, that's for sure. It's a funny thing about communication, and my wife's here too. We work together, so we're always in the same office. But even in your relationships, you can say something and it be received in totally different than what you intended, and it takes you back to it takes you back to that that saying that when someone speaks, there's what they said, what they intended to say, and what the other person heard. How do you avoid that? I'm going to get you to give me some marriage tips today on that. How do you avoid that?
Let me give that, by the way, excellent point that you brought up, Will. Very common in relationships. And let me give you a great example to help us bridge the point, which is the following sentence that we say all the time and has no meaning. I need more alone time. I need more alone time. We say that all the time in relationships.
Right.
But the challenge is, which comes to the tip a little later on, what does that mean, Will? Does alone time mean, hey, babe, I need 15 minutes in the morning to read a book? Does that mean, hey, could I go to a cave for 2 weeks and you never text me or talk to me? Does that mean, hey, I need 30 minutes with the dog 3 times a week to clear my head? Because if we don't specify what that simple sentence means, Will, it could also get interpreted as this person doesn't love me. This
Right.
person doesn't like to be around me. This person doesn't care about me. So if we don't specify it, we lose. So what's the advice? The idea is whenever possible, try and be specific as to why something is happening or why you need something in the relationship. Let me give you a simple way to demonstrate this. So instead of saying, hey, babe, I need more alone time, it would sound something more like, hey, babe, I would love 15 minutes in the morning to read my book because it helps me clear my mind and show up better for our family. Is that okay with you? And you ask for permission at the end. There is nobody who's going to say no to that statement.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So you just have to be more clear in what you're saying and give a reason for why. So that way they can't imagine 20 different scenarios with it.
That,
Okay. That,
correct.
that makes a lot of sense there. So that may help me out a good bit. We'll see what happens. Okay. So most of our scenarios with sellers, and that's what we're talking about specifically, most of our scenarios with sellers, they give us a call, they have a house, they have a problem. We're going out to their house. You had mentioned earlier that you try to, if I took this correctly, people at a certain level, you try to certainly not dress better than them or anything like that. You want to make them comfortable feeling at least on their level or a little bit lower on their level. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think an easy way to think about it from easier to implement perspective,
Mhm.
because they might get the wrong impression going back to
Right,
specificity, I guess,
right.
is you need to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you want to sell to.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, and I'll use a personal example with my clients, I have dinner with them all the time. All the people
Mm-hmm.
I work with are my buddies. They're my friends. They're not
Mm-hmm.
just transactions that I put money in my bank account. I
Right.
hang out with them. Like I'm hanging out with a few of them next week when I'm in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're a part of who I am. So because I'm spending so much time with them, I'm understanding a lot more than just the challenges they have with communication. I
Mm-hmm.
understand who they are as a person, which falls into three categories in my business: the high ranking women executive who always feels like her voice isn't heard, the Indian technology professional who works at, let's say, Amazon, who wants to get promoted, and it has really broken English. And the third one is the entrepreneur, the investor who wants to get to the next level of their growth, who's
Mm-hmm.
really ambitious, gun, A player personality. So when we start to understand how they live their life, we start to learn the language of that person's day-to-day life. So we can use that languaging whenever we sell to them. So an example of this in your business would be, I wouldn't use any jargon,
Mm-hmm.
anything really complicated when I'm talking to people who have foreclosed homes,
Right.
because they'll immediately say, "Oh, I don't want to talk to this person. I don't understand a thing what they're saying."
Right. Right. So keep it very simple, and that's right on point. I mean, we talk a lot about, especially newer investors that like to impress sellers with all the lingo and all the language they understand as far as buying subject to the existing financing and that sort of thing, which the seller has no idea. Now, what are we really doing? We're taking over their mortgage payments. We're going to make their mortgage payments for them, and that's a much better way to put it, because it's easy to understand. So you're absolutely right on that. I 100% agree. Keep it simple. As for me, see, it doesn't matter if I'm going to someone that's in a $500,000 house or a $50,000 house. I'm wearing usually a collared short sleeve shirt and a pair of shorts. I mean, just some cargo shorts, very non-threatening, because I think that sends a message to people right off the bat. You're not in a suit. You're not a lawyer type or anything like that. You're just an average person that's there to have a conversation. Yeah. You think
Absolutely.
just putting people at ease, don't you think that gives you an edge out of the gate if you don't look threatening in any way as far as
1000%.
yeah.
And it really goes back to the whole idea of WIIFM radio. And for those who don't
Hmm.
know what WIIFM radio stands for, what's in it for me,
Hmm.
right? And I think your example really brought that home, because what the investor cares about when they're a beginner is, oh yeah, like this is cool financing, it's creative, there's different terms. Oh, if I can move the lease here or pay the mortgage here. But what does the seller care about? The
Hmm.
seller cares about, hey, someone's going to pay my mortgage. Okay. Somebody's going to get rid of this house that's been a problem in my life and burden for seven. I'm just making things up. Obviously,
Right.
I would have to talk to the person to
Sure.
get more ideas. But it's like, okay, this person's getting rid of this problem for me.
Right.
So so then the conversation changes from, let's look at the terms of the agreement, which the seller doesn't care about, to, wait a second, let's focus on what's in it for you. Hey,
Mhm.
this is what you're going to get. We're going to start covering your mortgage payments. Life is going to get a lot easier for you. You're going to be a lot less stressed out. This is what we call in sales: don't sell the flight, sell the vacation. Like,
Mhm.
who cares about the flight? I don't
Right.
care it's the flight sucks. Like, the food is really bad. I'm stuck in between two people I don't like. I'm really waiting for Hawaii. Sell me on Hawaii. Tell me how amazing Hawaii is and how you're the best person to take me there.
Right. Okay. Well, Brandon, tell everybody about your YouTube channel. If they go check that out and subscribe, what all are you going to show them and teach them on your channel?
Absolutely, Will. Such a pleasure to be on the show. So there's two ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel, MasterTalk, where we share hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. So you'll see videos on how to build relationships effectively. You'll find some daily speaking practices. Really, we want MasterTalk to be the encyclopedia of speaking. And you could also follow us on Instagram as well.
Okay, awesome. Well, Brandon, thanks so much for joining us today and talking to us about the importance of communication. It's just really critical in what we do, dealing direct to seller and negotiation as well.
Absolutely, Will. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. We appreciate you. Okay, guys, that is it for this episode of the Sub2Deals Show. Again, we would love to have you subscribe to our YouTube channel at sub2tv.com. And you can also download our absolutely free guide on creative finance. Just go to sub2deals.com/CFG. That's for Creative Finance Guide. It'll tell you all about creative finance, how to get started, and it's absolutely free. So go check it out. So guys, until our next episode, get out there, talk to some sellers, and buy some houses.